Like to go now to the IPCC authors. For our first presentation, Dr. Rodel D. Lasco will discuss the key findings of the IPCC AR6 Working Group 2 and the summary for policymakers. Dr. Lasco is coordinating lead author of Chapter 5 on food, fiber, and other ecosystem products, and a drafting author of the summary for policymakers. He is also the executive director of the Oscar M. Lopez Center. Please welcome Dr. Lasco.
Good morning to all of you. And I am now pleased to report to you, to present to you the key messages of the summary for policymakers of the 6th Assessment Report Working Group 2. Let me just share my screen here. The summary for policymakers was released a few days ago in February 28. CNN said, "Delays means death. We're running out of ways to adapt to the climate crisis." Now, what are the key messages of the report? Well, overall, if we look at the whole report, the report basically says two things. First, that the cumulative scientific evidence is so strong, it's unequivocal. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and the health of the planet. In addition, the report says any further delay in concerted global action. Now that's the key, concerted global action, and we will miss the brief and a rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. We have a window, but it's rapidly closing. We need concerted action. So these are the two key, or one key message, kind of dual key message of the report. And now let me go to some of the details of our report. Well, one of the key changes in the AR6 compared to the 5th assessment report is that whereas AR5 focused on climate risks, in AR6, what we did was to focus more on climate resilient development, looking at human systems and natural systems, how they are coupled, how they are interacting, and how we can pursue climate resilient development. And now, looking at the specific messages of the report, first, the first section, section B, is the observed impacts from climate change. And message 1 here is that because of human-induced climate change, we are experiencing widespread adverse impacts and also related loss and damages to nature, to people, and this is beyond natural climate vulnerability. In other words, more than nature, this is human cost, and this is what we call now climate change. The second message is that there is differences in vulnerability of ecosystems, of people. They differ in terms of vulnerability. And approximately 3.5 billion people, so that's almost half of all the people in the world, live in contexts that are highly vulnerable to climate change. Message 3, global warming, now it will reach about 1.5 degrees in the near term, would cause unavoidable increases and in multiple climate hazards and present multiple risks, both to humans and to ecosystems. So again, the multiplicity of risks and hazards are in the horizon. Message B4, beyond 2040, now depending on the level of global warming, this will lead to, again, multiple risks to both natural and human systems. And here's just an example. It's a busy slide, but just at the global scale, we see here the observed, these are already the observed impacts. And the blue color means it is, there's very high to very high confidence in terms of attribution. So at the global level, changes in ecosystem structure, at the terrestrial ecosystems, you see blue, so high attribution, it's changing. Freshwater ecosystems, same, as well as oceans. In terms of species migrating or shifting their range, terrestrial, freshwater, ocean, again, very high, very confident that this can now be attributed to climate change. Now, the other example or the other figure there in the report is showing the effects or what we are observing in terms of human systems. And again, just looking at the global level here, this purplish color is medium confidence that we can attribute this to climate change. This is water scarcity. There's some positive, some negative. Agricultural crop production is mainly negative. Again, medium confidence, not much on livestock. Fisheries, again, medium confidence, negative. And you can go on. And for example, infectious diseases, it's medium confidence, negative. Heat, malnutrition, and other impacts, again, high attribution, negative. That means we are seeing the impacts of climate change more and more in our natural and human systems. Message B5, the impacts and risks are becoming increasingly complex. Again, this is a repeated message of the report. It's more difficult to manage as a result of these complex interaction of impacts and risks. Multiple climate hazards, again, will occur again simultaneously, and multiple climatic and non-climatic risks will interact. So just imagine this interacting or interactions between climatic, non-climatic, and the hazards multiplying. And if you combine all of this, there is a different level of complexity that we can expect. And then B6, if global warming exceeds 1.5, even temporarily or transiently in the coming decades, this is what is known as overshoot, then many human and natural systems will face additional severe risks compared to below 1.5. Again, simply the message is that we want to keep it at 1.5. And in terms of the projected impacts, again, there's a lot in the report. I'll just capture here some examples. Impacts on terrestrial and human ecosystems. This is the famous burning embers diagram. For biodiversity loss, you will notice at 1.5, it becomes the risks. The redder it becomes, then the higher the risk. Impacts and risks are much higher beyond 1.5, whether biodiversity, structural change, tree mortality, and here in terms of the oceans, corals, warm water corals, seagrass, and so on. And you can see, again, that's why we're so concerned to keep it below 1.5 or 2 degrees centigrade. Now, what about adaptation, current adaptation and its benefits? This is section C of the report. And here, the first message is that there is progress. Adaptation is ongoing across all sectors and regions with multiple benefits. So adaptation is happening. That's the point. However, the progress of adaptation is uneven. In fact, many initiatives prioritize immediate and near-term climate risks as opposed to medium-range or long-range climate risks or long-term climate risks. So we see there's an even distribution, and we can imagine between countries and within countries, we can observe this unevenness. Now, C2, there are, in fact, many feasible and effective adaptation options to address the impacts of climate change, both in human systems and in natural systems. Message C3, there are soft limits, and these are adaptation limits, but they can be addressed or overcome if we address a range of constraints, principally financial, governance, institutional, and policy. So these are soft because we can address certain constraints and we can overcome them. However, there are also hard limits, and there are reports that some systems, ecosystems especially, have already reached this hard limit, and beyond which they cannot, of course, we cannot adapt anymore because the impacts are so severe. Message C4, there is also an evidence for an increase in maladaptation across many sectors and regions since AR5. And maladaptation, these are the negative effects of what we what we supposed to be are adaptation measures, and this maladaptation can be avoided by flexible, multi-sectoral, inclusive, and long-term planning and implementation of adaptation options. So again, the point here is that what we think of as adaptation may actually lead to negative impacts, and therefore we have to be careful implementing adaptation measures. And then C5, enabling conditions are also necessary. They are key for implementing, accelerating, and sustaining adaptation in human systems as well as in ecosystems. And here's just some of the chart again in the report showing feasible climate responses. And again, I just cut this portion of that chart, and this is for land and ocean ecosystems. And just as, to cite an example here, food security, improved cropland management, and efficient livestock system here. So if the, again, similar color coding here, blue, that means there's a high confidence level. And for this one, for these two columns, and this is medium. And so you can see here that in terms of feasibility, there's medium confidence there, but there's very high confidence in terms of synergy with mitigation. And in terms of the feasibility, the economic, technological, again, the larger the circle here, the more confident, the higher the feasibility. And like for food here, cropland management, very high economic benefits, or the profitability in terms of economics, technological feasibility, not so high, medium as well for institutional. This is social, environmental high, and as well medium for geophysical. So again, these are the feasibility dimensions, the potential feasibility. And the point of this chart is there are options out there that are effective and that are feasible. Now, this chart, on the other hand, shows that these adaptation options have many benefits, both for ecosystems, for ethnic groups, for gender, for low-income groups, and of course, related to sustainable development goals. And if we pick again food security here, improve cropland management, we see there are positive benefits, very high for blue in terms of ecosystems, medium for gender, not so much for ethnic, but very high also for low-income groups. And it also, there are many benefits in terms of the sustainable development goals. So the message of this chart is that options out there could provide benefits to various sectors, as well as in helping us meet our sustainable development goals. And then finally, the last section, section D, is all about climate resilient development, or CRD. And message from this one, D1, is that from multiple sources, there are evidence says that demonstrate the worldwide climate resilient development action is now more urgent than compared to the AR5, the previous assessment. And the report presents this chart showing that we have a choice. The future can be a world like this, or a world like this. This kind of world, of course, this is the present, and we'll traverse these different pathways depending on our choices. And this is the worst case scenario, where the planet really warms and there are so many adverse impacts. And this is the scenario that's more ideal, where we control greenhouse gas emissions, and where we are able to address the impacts of climate change. So here, the report is saying that this pathway is in our hands, depending on our actions today. The second message is that CRD will be enabled when the government, civil society, private sector make inclusive development choices that prioritize risk reduction, equity, and justice, and when decision-making processes, finance, and actions are integrated, that's the word, keyword, integrated across governance levels, sectors, and timeframes. D3, similar to that or related to that, integrated, inclusive planning and investment in everyday decision-making can significantly increase the adaptive capacity of urban and rural settlements. And then D4, safeguarding biodiversity and ecosystems is fundamental to CRD. That is in the light of the threats of climate change to these ecosystems, as well as their roles in adaptation and mitigation. So it's important to safeguard our natural ecosystems and their biodiversity. And then D5, our choices in the next decade is so critical. This is the point of this message. In the next decade, the next 10 years will be critical in determining whether, to what extent, medium and long-term pathways will deliver higher or lower climate resilient development. So the report basically warning us or reminding us how critical it is in the next 10 years that we act accordingly to the report, or according to the recommendations of the report. And so finally, let me end with just some implications, given this limited time, really just teasing out some important sectors we have to look at. And of course, this is not part anymore of the IPCC report. That's why I'm not using anymore the template of the IPCC. And in the Philippines, as we have seen, food security, one of the key risks. And so we have to look in our own country, what are the impacts of climate change on food security? And here's an example of one study showing that corn yield could decline by 44%, 35%, depending on the scenario, sometime in the future, if we do not adapt, or we do not do anything to adapt to climate change. So food security could be at risk in our country. We have to pay attention to it. Also ecosystems, and here is one study we conducted for the DNR and with UNDP support, showing that our coral reefs are most sensitive even to an additional warming of 1 degree centigrade. These ecosystems are already at risk. Our forests, they have been declining. This is done in the 1900s, and this is now the present, about 100 years of change. And we have lost about 50% of our forest cover. And now with climate change, with a warming planet, what will happen to the biodiversity, to the different plants and animals in our forests? This is something we need to study as a country and find out what may happen. Water resources are also very important. We have watersheds. They do provide water for domestic irrigation industry and power needs. And with changing rainfall patterns, and the IPCC report also put a lot of emphasis on water resources. There's one chapter devoted to it. And so we also need to pay attention on how climate change may affect water resources in our country. And sea level rise is so important. It's related to migration of people, also to loss of mangrove forests. And for example, in this one study, up to 17%, so that's about 17 million people, may be exposed to future sea level rise by the year 2100. So we have to pay attention to this hazard, to this impact of climate change, and we need to find ways to adapt to these impacts. And so with this, I'd like to end my presentation. I'm looking forward to interacting with you during the open forum of this event. Again, thank you for listening, and good morning again to all of you.